Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Trauma Uncensored. I'm your host, Brooke Shearer. We've got another great episode for you today, which we will jump into shortly. If you're a regular listener of this podcast, thank you for your continued support. And if this is your first time listening, I'm so glad you found us. This podcast was created as a safe space for community, connection, resources, and support for anyone navigating trauma, grief, mental health, or pain. Here, your experiences are both valid and valued. Your story matters, and it's important to know you are not walking this path alone. It is my hope that each episode helps you feel more connected and reminds you that it is possible to not only live, but to truly thrive after hardship. Trauma Uncensored began as an extension of my own healing journey following immense trauma. The course of my life changed in the fall of 2015 and led to the tragic death of our 9-year-old son, Logan, in 2016 due to a distracted driver whose reckless choice behind the wheel led to the crash. In the time since Logan was taken from us, I have fought for my mental health and for my survival. That fight has led me down an unexpected path of discovery, healing, and recovery. It has given me the tools to sit here today and share these conversations with you. If you're new to the Trauma Uncensored podcast, I invite you to start with episode 1 titled The Crash. In that episode, I share the beginning of my story, which provides important context for the conversations and guest stories that follow. Speaking of guests, we believe our listeners' voices matter deeply, and we welcome those who wish to share their experiences. If interested, click on the submission link in our show notes below, email hello@traumauncensored.com, or reach out through any of our social platforms. Just be sure to include the word guest in your submission. All show information, resources, and links can also be found in the show notes. Be sure to follow us on our social media platforms and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. And if this podcast speaks to you, and I'm sure it will, we would truly appreciate you leaving a review. Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. This podcast discusses topics related to grief, loss, trauma, mental health challenges, survival, and more. While I have gained deep personal experience in these areas, I am not a therapist, and this show is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. So stay tuned for another installment of Trauma Uncensored, where, as always, we're healing out loud.
Trauma Uncensored.
Trauma Uncensored.
Trauma Uncensored.
Ladies, Melanie, Michelle, Lindsay, welcome back to another episode of Trauma Uncensored. I'm so excited to have you guys with us. For those of you who don't know of these three wonderful women, I do encourage you to go back and listen to each of their individual episodes. And also, we've done a previous panel where these fine ladies talked about holidays and how, to have new experiences or how to do holidays again or anniversaries or any sort of engagement after having gone through extreme divorce like Michelle has, spousal abuse and divorce. Melanie lost her husband Leon. Lindsay lost her son Christian. I of course lost my son Logan. That is episode 28. So I encourage you to go back if you have not had the opportunity to sit with these ladies before. So, ladies, it is a new year. How are we feeling about that?
Excited.
Are you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The new year is the new year for many. I mean, I personally don't believe in January 1st necessarily being like the mark of something to start over, but that is what our society, I feel like we're constantly in this like mode of new beginnings, right? Or new chapters, or it doesn't just happen starting January 1st. But it's interesting because I am walking forward for the first time, like on January 1st, I was like, I am so glad 2025 is over. Like something for me mentally just said, this is the opportunity for a new year. Whereas before it was kind of like fluid, right? For me, my life was, Logan's gone and I'm kind of moving on through, but this year seems different. And it's interesting to have that feeling, to have that mindset, because each one of us sitting here in this panel have experienced what you could call new beginnings after loss, after extreme hardship. You could call them maybe second beginnings, because I'm not quite sure. New is the word that I really want to look for. It could be unique beginnings. Um, and so for myself, having lost Logan, I chose to have another child 3 years later. Lindsay lost her son Christian in the hospital right after his birth, and she chose to have another child. Melanie's husband Leon passed away, and she chose to get remarried. And Michelle had extreme spousal abuse. Her story is just, it's amazing. And I encourage everyone listen, not just to hers, but to Lindsay and Melanie's as well. But after everything she experienced in her first marriage, she chose to get married again. And those are monumental, I believe, monumental hills to both climb, accept, and choose to go down, to go over that hill and choose that path, after having lost, after having suffered extreme, harm and abuse. And so today we're going to talk about what it's like through the eyes of these women to have consciously made that choice to go from hell into bringing light back into their lives in the same type of way in which they experienced that hardship. So, Lindsay, I'm actually just going to jump right in, and I want to start with you. So, for those who haven't heard Lindsay's story, her son Christian died shortly after he was born in the hospital. And Lindsay would go on to have another child. And you know, I can speak from my experience in terms of what that journey looked like stepping forward. Um, and it was a hard one, but it's also brought an immense amount of joy and, again, new beginnings, second beginnings along the way, new opportunities. But it was a very hard decision to make. Healing is such a huge component of getting there, I believe. What did healing look like for you before, or after Christian's passing and before you had another child? What did it, how did that help you along your path in saying, I know I want to do this again?
hmm well, I think what helped me uh, immensely was completely tossing the notion of new normal out the window. You hear that after you go through any kind of trauma, you hear, I'm just trying to find my new normal. It is not normal to survive the death of your child, right? It is not normal to be asked to live the life that comes after some of the things that we all have experienced. So that actually helped me with regard to healing and taking next steps. Um, I'm not going to be normal. There are days that are going to be really hard, and that's okay. So if I'm going to move forward, it's okay that I accept this life that's not normal. It's not normal to hold your child in your arms while he suffocates to death and the grief that comes with that. So, adopting that mindset that I wasn't going to have a new normal per se, but I was prepared to step into what was next for us. Um, we we knew we wanted to have more children. It was not easy for me by any means to even get pregnant with Christian. I talked about before how we started the adoption process, and then he was that miracle, that less than 1%, and then he didn't end up surviving. Um, we had to go through IVF after that. When Bowen, our first son, was born, there were complications, which left a ton of scarring and a lot of reconstructive surgeries. And so essentially, I just had very little um, healthy womb to work with basically. And so IVF was really the option after we lost Christian. So, that was that was really painful because, here I am grieving the loss of my son who made it to the stage that the doctors wanted him to be there. He was in my arms and then he died. And so here I am having to stick myself with shots and go to these appointments and check the lining and be told no, and all of this stuff when we had already made it. So that was really hard. That did not feel like a new beginning for me. That felt like torture and anguish on top of what I'd already gone through. Like, why more? Why more hurt? Why more defeat? Why more devastation? um we got pregnant the first Christmas after we lost Christian. And that felt like such a huge miracle. That felt like such a Christmas blessing. And we miscarried Christmas Eve. So I'm like,
Mm.
oh my gosh, after all of it. So then we had to decide, are we going to go round two with IVF? And, around is a long time if you've not experienced fertility treatments, because you take all these measures to even get ready for a transfer, and then they could tell you, no, it's not time. So, you know, I had my doctor who was just like, listen, I'm a believer, you're a believer. Let's throw a Hail Mary basically, because it's not in our hands anyway. You want to give it a shot. And you only have so many eggs to work with, but he's like, let's give it a shot. And we did, and that's Chance. So we named him Chance because we got another chance. And he will
I
tell you
love it.
that he's magic, and he was not to be denied. He's still not to be denied. So he was a huge new beginning for us, but it didn't all come with warm and fuzzies. I was terrified every day. I was terrified through the whole pregnancy and got stuck in my own head in some way, and I was afraid of being panicked, or during the C-section, which I knew was coming. So, um, new beginnings sound beautiful, and they can be when they all work out right, but it doesn't necessarily come without the trauma of how, from what got you there.
Well, and
And
it's so interesting to me because I'm sitting here listening to this, and you have opened my eyes to a new perspective, actually. And that's why I love having these conversations, because we had to do IVF for Mila as well. And
mhm,
we were very fortunate that she took on the first try, and
mm,
there were no complications, and she was born, perfectly. And, you know, what, and Jordan and I have always walked around going, she was meant to be here.
mhm,
We heard that we should go down this path, and she just validated,
mhm,
because we only had a few embryos. I think we had 3 embryos, and then they implanted 2 and then kept 1, and then that one fizzled out.
mhm,
And we hadn't even discussed what it would be like if we didn't would we do this again? How I can't I can't imagine, because yes, we took these steps to have another child after having lost one, which is this huge thing in and of itself.
mhm,
And we got very lucky that we only had to do the round once. I have honestly never thought about someone such as yourself who has lost a child and then continues down this path, does IVF or has a miscarriage, and still continues to push forward in order to, have another baby. Can you talk
mhm,
to me about the experience and, how you managed to what tools you used, or how you managed to make your way through all of those heartbreaking disappointments between Christian and
mhm.
ending up with Chance?
Yeah. So a huge kind of propeller forward was Bowen, our first son. I I couldn't fathom that being his story, where he thought he was going to be the big bubby, and then all of a sudden he wasn't, and he knew that, and I don't know, it just I've mentioned this before. I'm a huge woman of faith, and it was always on my heart that I would have the desire of my heart, to have another child. And it never occurred to me that it wasn't going to happen. So that knowing and that faith helped. And then, wanting to give Bowen a sibling, and quite honestly, wanting to share the experience with Mike, and to parent more children together. And that I couldn't fathom that was going to be the end for us, with the loss of Christian as it relates to having kids. So,
And that I feel that is so important because you are sitting here as an example of mindset, right?
yes, that's
You
what it was.
and
Yeah.
really, honestly, all of you are sitting here as an example of mindset. You have experienced horrible, traumatic, painful situations, and you have chosen to go the route of positivity and joy and happiness as opposed to allowing yourself sit and dwell in what happened in the past.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think go
I
ahead.
mean, that would have been debilitating. It almost, chasing what your heart hopes for gives you purpose. And honestly, I look back now and I think, how in the world? How did I do that? How did I even get up? How did I stick another shot in my stomach? How did I go to the hundreds of appointments and drive the thousands of miles and do the surgeries and all the things? And I have no idea. I really can't tell you. I think it's amazing how much strength hope can give you when you have nothing else to rely on. And so it was a hope and a prayer, man. That's what we did.
And you trusted the process.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And I
because when
mm,
you lose everything when you experience loss in the way that we did, there's you kind of relinquish control, right? Because you've lost the naivety that the worst possible thing can't happen to you, because it did.
mhm,
So now, you relinquish control because it's out of your hands.
right. And that is something that I feel we are not allowed to we're not allowed to bring into our lives because how we're supposed to grieve, how society shows us we're supposed to grieve, we have to mourn this forever. And then I think people begin to feel guilty or shameful for wanting to, move forward. And I mean, this is
Hmm.
a question, that Melanie can chime in on too. Were there any times, well, that's probably a silly question because I'm sure there were. I'm sure that there were times because I had it that I felt I'm having another child.
Hmm.
Are people going to look at me like I'm replacing the one that I lost?
Hmm.
Am I a bad mother because I'm having another one where this one was gone? And I think we're kind of conditioned to kind of have this mindset that we need to mourn and grieve forever in a way that doesn't allow us to move forward and reintroduce that joy into our lives. So, Melanie, can you actually speak to, your process and maybe the thoughts in terms of that you had, from having lost Leon and then marrying David? Did you feel, was there guilt?
Oh
Was
my gosh.
there, I hate to even say the word shame, but I mean, we're
Yeah.
uncensored and we're transparent. Shame is a huge adjective for people
Mhm.
who have lost and grieved.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, I can talk a whole episode on that. Um, yeah, I mean, guilt and shame. I'm discovering more and more through my own therapy work is kind of the root at a lot of the things that I deal with and the decisions that I've made. And the, um, negative thoughts, and the guilt and shame is really the root of it. And when I started, dating David, um, an immense amount of guilt, and the guilt leads, for me, a lot of times the guilt then leads to shame. And I was also terrified that, um, being vulnerable, that I would lose again. And I was terrified what people were going to think. Were people going to think that, my love for Leon has now disappeared, and, uh, that he's no longer a part of our story. And, just, my mind would go to, does Leon think I don't love him anymore? Like, I mean, just so many emotions as I'm trying to still process and navigate the loss and grief side of it. I was a mess. I was an actual, real fucking mess, to be completely honest. Yeah, it
Well, and
was.
you're putting yourself in such a vulnerable state. I mean, you bring up
Mhm,
a great point. Would Leon be upset if, right? And I
mhm,
think, and Lindsay, you could probably relate to, or you might be able to relate to this too. But I know there was always like this little bit of gnawing for me of, we're having another baby. Would
Mhm.
Logan feel replaced? Would Logan
Of
feel
course.
like I've moved on, right?
mhm,
Like I've
Absolutely.
moved on. And what's beautiful about the situation and about this conversation for all of us is that we can hold both experiences together,
Mhm.
right? We can have experienced this extreme trauma and this loss and even the abuse with Michelle, and have that experience, and have grown, and be able to hold the new beginnings as an extension, I would say, an
Mhm.
extension of what we experienced and learned from before.
Mhm.
yeah, I'm learning. I'm still learning.
Yeah,
David and I have
oh,
been married
always.
almost 10 years, and I haven't always, as we continue to grow and we continue to experience life, and I continue to walk on this healing journey, I discover more and more about my relationship with him, and how I can continue to grow that. So it's evolving every minute, I feel like. And um, you brought up, how Logan would feel, and how, Christian would feel. And so for me too, I was also having an extreme amount of guilt with the boys,
Mm,
feeling like, are they going to think that I'm trying to replace dad? Are they going to think that because when David and I committed to this relationship and committed um, to discover each other, were my boys going to think that they came second now? There
Mhm.
was just so much ick to navigate
Mhm.
that just made it extremely hard. It wasn't easy.
well, and I am curious because obviously you did navigate it.
Hmm.
Um, what did you choose for yourself in order to be able to walk alongside all of these feelings while you navigated, and still be able to move forward and open that door for David?
Hmm. Sure. I think that's actually a kind of a loaded question, because I'm not so sure I always did it with, I did it the best that I could at that time, right? I feel like, until I kind of see this journey and going, seeking community and seeking therapy and seeking different help, that we carry this toolbox. And at first, I don't think my toolbox had a lot of tools in it. I was kind of walking with like a hammer and a screwdriver and fixing and doing things the best I could. And as I've walked through this journey, I've been able to put more and more tools into that toolbox to be more successful. And, I think at first, I talked about on the podcast with, when it was just you and I talking, that I kind of moved through the motions for the first, 6, 7, 8 years. And again, I did the best I could. And I knew, I think kind of like Lindsay said, like, I knew that I was young and that this was not the end of my story, and that I deserved and the boys deserved to be loved again. And, we deserved to have a new and a different family. So that was kind of the fuel that kept me moving and kept me dedicated to trying to make it work, and knowing that I deserved it, but yet at the same time, so afraid that maybe I didn't deserve it. I had gone through abusive relationships before meeting Leon, and kind of for really my whole life felt undeserving. And so when I met him, I was like, oh my gosh, like I never thought I would meet anybody like him. And then he was taken from me, and it was like, no, you were right. You didn't deserve it. That's why he was taken from you.
Mm.
And then I met David, who is just, I mean, one of the greatest humans that's ever walked the planet. And so, yeah, I was constantly wrestling with, be very careful on how much you let him in, because you'll probably lose this too.
Mhm.
Yeah, I understand that. I don't know if we talked about this. We may have talked about this in one of your guys' episodes, but after Logan passed, I mean, and mine happened, that kind of closing off happened right after Logan died, and for me it was with Mallory. I
Mhm.
remember the first however many months, 6 months maybe. I was still there and a parent for Mallory, but subconsciously I think I was so scared of losing her that I kind of put up a wall. I know my mom was concerned because of how distant I was with Mallory, and it wasn't an intentional, obviously it wasn't intentional. I think it was just my body and my mind trying to keep me safe from the potential of losing, again. And obviously, that's not the case today, but it is something that is hard. But the one thing that I'm really wanting to highlight is listening to the both of you talk about the knowing. And Michelle, I'm actually going to follow up in asking you this as well here in just a second. But you guys had the knowing. So the way I look at life, for what I believe, we're constantly in this human experience fighting with our egos, right? Our egos are trying to keep us safe, but they also lie to us. I didn't deserve it, right? There's shame, there's guilt. But we have this ingrained and innate intuition that is actually trying to guide us, and I believe guides us if we truly listen. But then that ego comes in and says, but I'm afraid, or this is going to happen to me again, or this is never going to happen. But you guys picked up on that knowing, even though it wasn't like, oh, I know, so I'm just going to, do this and have no questions and just trust the process and, not continue to grieve. You guys were like, okay, I'm fucking scared. This is awful. And I have just this gut feeling, just this knowing. And if
Mhm.
there is anything that has, for me personally, changed my life, especially in the past, I would say year, like Jordan will tell you all the time, why do we ever question your intuition? He always says that.
Mhm.
Why do we question it? Because,
Mhm.
it always ends up panning out the way, you've got this gut feeling. But
Mhm.
for me, for all of these years, I would second guess that intuition. My ego would second guess it because of what I'd learned from the past, or, experiences that I had had that taught me that, life wasn't okay. And so in the past year, I've really allowed myself to work really hard to let go of that fear, and allowing the ego and the fear and the anxiety to drive my decisions, because it can get so, that knowing, that innate feeling, that intuition can be so very, very strong that I
Mhm.
actually have to stand up like against the ego and say, shut the fuck up, which is
Mhm.
hard because that is a learned tool. That is a
Yeah.
learned human tool because as humans, we are supposed to listen to that ego to keep us safe, right? To keep
Mhm.
us safe in these lives. So having that knowing, I think, is a very important point that both of you um, have pointed out. And for Michelle, whose experience doesn't include physical loss in the same sense that Lindsay's and mine and Melanie's has, I am really interested to hear about your experience in after having experienced such extreme abusive trauma with your ex-husband
Mhm.
and allowing yourself, because I've actually sat and thought about this. How in the hell did she ever put that foot forward and trust anyone? Because I mean, I've got trust issues
Mhm.
that I'm working on, and they're nowhere near what yours look like. And I mean, I am super I'm super interested to hear.
Mhm.
Tell me about your process after your ex-husband and all of that abuse leading into your current marriage.
Well, like the other ladies have spoken of therapy, right? They had to get themselves into healing properly, and so that certainly helped to for me to work through what I had experienced my entire life with my parents, and most certainly with my ex husband and that marriage. But ultimately, my husband now, Paul, he made it very easy. He is so opposite in every kind of way from my ex husband. And so he's a very calm and level, right? Like, I think I've heard him raise his voice maybe twice in the almost 10 years that I've known him. So I think that is an indicator, right? Why he made it less scary, but that's not to say I don't still to this day live with trepidation
Mhm.
about the unknown and what may happen. And I got to give it to him. He is a patient man, almost to a fault sometimes. um, but he has been patient with me as I work through. But all that to say, he also is a man who brought his own baggage, his own traumas, his own experiences to our marriage. So it required both of us to come at it and be fully engaged. And it wasn't always the case. I'll be very honest, I was very nervous about getting married. I didn't want to ever get married again. I just wanted to be a really good mom, and marriage was not on the table for me. But Paul was very insistent that he wanted to be a great example to our boys, to the boys, about what marriage is, about what a husband and a father should be. Um, and I really couldn't deny it, right? Like, here's this man showing up, a man who's 11 years younger than me, showing up saying, I want to be this for you and these boys. And have we had bumps and curves along the way? Absolutely, a lot. He has had his own growth, his own journey. I've had mine, but we're here. We're still here. We're still making the effort every day. So I think there was it's a lot, right? Just like these girls have said of personal awareness, trusting the other person, trusting yourself, like you said, Brooke, going with your gut. And my gut is also never wrong. I've said many times I have no God given talent, but I have discernment and I can read a person like that. So I always go with it. And Paul is just a good human. And so he made it a lot easier.
That's and that's kind of like how I was telling Lindsay, I got lucky my first, time around, where I can't imagine what it was, like for her to experience another miscarriage after Christian and to go through this IVF and, all of these and have these disappointments on the in between. I'm going to kind of put you under the microscope, Michelle. And it's okay if you don't know how to answer this question, but I am curious because there are going to be other people out there who are going to be like, well, they're going to align with you and me in terms of the we got really lucky. And then they're also going to align with the Lindsays who struggled and struggled and struggled. We're okay. Let me ask this first. And this is going to get personal, but there's a point to it. Did you date others before Paul? It was just Paul. So you did just jump. Do you think you would feel the same way today had you or continued to push forward with with the dating and then getting married, had you fallen more in terms of the Lindsay camp? And I know it's a very lofty question, and I think it's worth trying to cover or worth covering because, as I sat there and told Lindsay, I never thought of it that way before. I never thought about the what would have happened had my next experience been a miscarriage or my next experience been a failed IVF. And that puts a whole new perspective in terms of how I think about this. For those of who are out there listening who are like, well, I'm very fortunate I got lucky. What are your thoughts on if you wouldn't have gotten so lucky with Paul to begin with?
Oh, I mean, I think
You're welcome.
yeah. Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. I think that luck is the eye of the beholder, right? Because yes, while Paul and I are married, we're 7.5 years in, we're committed, we're focused. It has not been easy. There have been many times over the years that I was ready to throw in the towel. He's ready to throw in the towel because it was just hard. His own personal growth, him trying, me still growing, healing. He has faults, I have faults. When something happens, we haven't always had the skills to kind of dig in and work through it. And really last year, we were talking before we started recording about 2025 and putting that year to rest. And I'm like you, Brooke, I don't think of things like a start and an end. It's always like moving and evolving. But I was very happy to put 2025 to bed. It was the most challenging year Paul and I have had as a couple. And we really got tested. And it was very interesting because we both grew so much individually. We both had standout years as our own selves, but we really struggled and were very disconnected from a marriage standpoint. But we did something we've never done before, and we attended therapy together last year. And it was a huge game changer. It was a big a dam was let open with Paul specifically to be open to it, to lean into it. His spiritual growth is just off the charts. So I see a lot of growth happening. So when you say we got lucky, I don't know if it's luck. It's hard work, right?
That's fair.
We make a choice every day, and really from the get-go, that we choose each other. And Mel knows better than anyone. There are days when I'm like, I don't want to choose this dude. It would be so much easier. I blew my life up before. I know what it's like to start with nothing. I can do it. And that's really not a good attitude to have, right? Because I've got this chip on my shoulder, like I've survived worse. Like I can handle this. Life would be better if I didn't have a husband. Well, that's not true because he does make my life better. He is my partner. We are committed. And my boys will joke and say, Mom, we're always choosing Paul. Like whatever happens, like Paul's our guy. And I love that. Right. And so I don't think if we really get right down to it, that there's ever been a risk of us not truly being together, but we've had to really work through it. And
that could be a whole panel in and of itself. marital work. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. But I think it's a choice, right? And Lindsay said it best, like there's so much power and hope, and we have that, we're committed. And so we continue to go through, but I cannot imagine ever doing it again. The thought of like having to be vulnerable with another human in that kind of a relationship, absolutely not. Melanie and I have talked about it. We're just going to be together. We're just going to have this kind of partnership and leave it at that. Because
listen, I've been saying that for years too. I'm, if if Jordan happens to pass before me or something else happens, I'm done. I'm just like, but then again, you said that before because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
picked up on that because I was thinking that same thing myself, it's it can be so much easier not to deal with it and then life tells you differently. So you
Mm-hmm.
can say possibly all you want, that you're not going to have any. Well, Lindsay didn't say she wasn't going to have any more kids, but I never had planned to have any more kids. And life had other opportunities for me that I chose to follow. Right. And, so we'll see. You may say that. You guys may say that, but you just never know. And how it unfolds is usually the universe doing something completely different than what we swear to. So it's interesting. I love hearing Michelle you speak about the work that it has taken between you and Paul in order to get where you are today, and that is a reflection on the work that you have chosen to do for yourself. So I imagine it is a tremendous difference in who you were and how you were in a relationship with your ex-husband versus how you show up now. I am curious for all of you, what have you done? How does, say, for Lindsay, parenting after loss, or Melanie, being in another marriage after loss, how is that different? And what were those avenues you chose to go down to make it different? But how are those relationships different? And how are you different in how you show up as both a parent or a spouse after having lost? And Michelle, you can chime in on this one too, because you are obviously doing things much differently now after your previous experiences.
That is such a good question. And I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday. After Chance was born, maternity leave ended, and then I extended it, and then it ended, and then I extended it. And I looked at Mike and I said, I cannot hand this child over to anyone else. So what I learned about new beginnings is that there's more. So I childbirth after child loss is a whole new beginning. And Brooke, I know you know this, right? You talk
Hmm.
about the fear and being different. I could not hand him over after all that we went through. So there comes a new career beginning. I mean, what am I going to do? Never go back to work again? So I retired from almost 20 years of education. I was a special education specialist for the school district, and I handed in my keys and I stepped out on another hope and a prayer to start a whole new career. So thank God I'm getting close to 10 years and a really beautiful real estate career, which I love because I was desperate to still serve my community and families in some way. But that changed me as a parent. I was not able to be a parent that was less present in the way that I was before. And I don't know if, fear definitely was a motivating factor there. I also find that, and it's twofold. So fear has changed me in a way, and I really try to work on that because you can't operate motivated by fear all the time, but I do fear for their safety. Um, I'm a little anxious when it comes to things that other parents might not be. But then on the flip side, I have perspective that life is fleeting. And I don't think at this age or at this stage of motherhood, I would have had that had we not gone through what we did. Life is fleeting. So we take the days off of school to go and travel. We, do things that other families look at us and they're like, well, why? Why? Well, what's the alternative? We miss the time. It's so hard. Yes, but what's the alternative? You don't go or you don't spend time together or whatever it might be. So I'm grateful for the change of perspective at such a relatively young age.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree. That's for me, that's been my experience too. As most people know, I was a professor before Logan passed away, and I remember the drive to get tenure.
Yeah.
That word always trips me up. To get that the pressure was so immense on me that I spent most of my time making sure that that complete package, everything I needed to be doing and everything I needed to be working on, and the classes I was teaching and building and recreating and the program, all of that stuff, the publishing, the art displays, all of that stuff, right,
Hmm.
was so forward in my mind that after Logan died, I was like, what the fuck was I thinking? Because for me, I thought I always had time with him. I
Hmm.
always thought I had time with my children. And sadly, I tell people, so Mallory was born in 2011, and I started at the University of Tampa in 2010. And of course, Logan passed away in 2016. So I've got about 5 years, right there with Mallory that I really don't remember much. And I hate to admit that. It is so hard for me to admit that to people that I was so busy with my job. I was traveling. I was, building up to secure that permanent spot at the university. And I lost out on so much with Logan. And I had really lost out on so much of Mallory in those, first formative years. And that's where I have taken now. It's the experiences, it's the
Hmm.
time, it's
Hmm.
the and I am such a go-getter, I'm so type A, I've always been this way, that it's hard for me, no matter how many times I tell myself, and it's been multiple times, I've gone through these cycles of I get passionate about something and I wanna do it and I wanna spend all my time doing it, and then, I'm doing it instead of doing this and this and this, and then I have to now I'm able to take a step back and go, "Okay, this is the priority. We're going to focus on this and we're going to let all of this other stuff stay to the side." Because at the end of the day, the girls, I mean, if, God forbid, if I lost another child, I want to be able to say that I spent
Hmm.
as much time with them as I could. I took them places, we had experiences, and that before wasn't ever on my radar. That just, was never on my radar. So if we want to go down like, the guilty spiral, that'll get me there.
Yeah.
Melanie, what about you?
Oh, wow. Um, I feel like this is a two episodes for me. I feel like it's really important for me to say before I kind of t go to my what I have to say is that for anybody out there trying to step into the next chapter, it's social media, it paints a picture. You think, I'm sure people on social media have followed my story and followed my journey and thought it's been rainbows and unicorns and puppies since, meeting David. And it's just, that's not the case. Like you, Brooke, when Leon was alive, I was very career focused and took life for granted, and always oh man, I'm getting emotional. I had always said, like, I never wanted to be the stay-at-home mom, and so I had this amazing career. I was traveling all the time because I thought I had time, right? And um after Leon died, I had to keep that job. It was the only way that I could support my family. And but when financially that I could make that choice to step away, I chose to step away to be a better mom and to be more present with the boys. And then I met David, and when like I had said before on the other episode, there was a long time that I wasn't doing the work. And so I was living life the best that I could. But I don't think I was a really good mom. I was um, using like staying busy. Sorry, gosh. I was using like staying busy as my coping strategy. So I'm meeting somebody new, and David and I traveled a lot without the kids, and um, I was dating, right? So, but not doing any of the work for myself. Like Michelle is my person in this life, and she has inspired me so much in her therapy journey, and how much she has dedicated herself to therapy has been a huge inspiration for me. And but I wasn't always doing the work. So when I wasn't doing the work, I was filling my life with band-aids, right? And a lot of those band-aids took my attention away from my children. So as I've been doing the work, my children now, they're probably so tired of me because I don't ever want to be without them. Like Brody came home from school and I just sat on his bed and I was like staring at him. He was like, "You were so weird." um, um, and I've recently, honestly, just had this huge epiphany that I have not shown up as a wife in the way that I want to either. This version of myself and the wife that I have been is the only version that David knows. And honestly, I don't know a lot about his first marriage as far, I don't want to speak ill of her at all. She's in my life. We co-parent, and I think, like I've said before, I think everybody does the best that they can, but he was divorced, and he was engaged to be married before, and I will speak ill of her. Like, she left him at the altar. So, like he has his own stuff too. And I think, he's such an incredible man who truly, I feel like, wears rose-colored glasses. So he's like only sees the best in everything and everybody. But this version of a wife is the only one that he's ever known. I know I can be better. I do think that the perspective, a positive perspective that I've been able to gain from my loss is that we only have this amount of time. And, as far as like parenting the boys, and this has been my way of parenting since Leon died, is I got bigger fish to fry. And I say that all the time. Like, I just got bigger fish to fry. And, so there's been times that I'm sure people have questioned my parenting style. But there's, the small things in life, the leaving the lights on and the socks on the floor in the messy room, like, doesn't bother me at all. It doesn't bother me. I have way bigger fish to fry, and it's making sure that they understand that life is short as well, and that we have a job to do here, and our purpose is bigger than our loss. And, that has really, really, really been my focus from the beginning, that we have a story to tell. And, we were not given this tragedy to pull the wool over our eyes and pull the sheets over our head and just bury ourselves in grief like that. If there's one good thing that I can say that I've done right from the very beginning, it's been that.
And that's great, because what I think a lot of people don't allow themselves to do post something traumatic, whether it be loss or abuse, or, because that becomes like this definition of us, right? That becomes what defines who we are, or so we think. So we're led to believe. And what people don't realize is there is an opportunity for perspective, for
Mhm.
new perspectives, for new understandings, for recognizing that, I mean, that is probably one of the biggest gifts that I've received, or that I've gained since Logan's passing, is this new perspective of life can be over in a blink of an eye.
Mhm.
Or, I could have had experienced this awful situation, and it doesn't have to define me. I can choose, right? We're back to that word choice. I can choose to continue to live my life because I've only got this life. And I have figured out what's most important. I feel like the first 35 years of my life, I was kind of blindly walking along this path. What I know now is to it was searching for acceptance and for approval within myself for other people who had, you know, put their shit on me all of their lives, or who I grew up with, or, past traumas. I was trying to fill this hole that only inner child work could allow me later to disconnect from. So I kind of felt like I was just kind of like a zombie trying to figure out where I was going, what I was doing, who I was supposed to be in terms of who others thought I should be, or what others. And then
Oh my gosh,
Logan,
yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
Logan passes away, and um all of a sudden I I like you said, I don't give a shit about, I mean, if there are dishes in the sink
It's
overnight,
whatever.
that Mallory will get to them the next morning, right? I'm not
Mhm.
going to be that type of person who's going to cause undue stress or negativity because she left a couple of dishes in the sink, but I know she'll get
Mhm.
to them in the morning, right?
Yeah.
You learn how to choose if you allow yourself. You learn how to choose really to grab onto the things that actually matter and
Mhm.
let go of the things and the things within yourself that are doing nothing but harm.
Mhm.
And what I want to say to you is, I hear a lot of this pain that you carry for what you tell the story you tell yourself about being a bad mom or being a bad wife. And first and foremost, were working with the tools that you had. You were trying to survive. There is no shame, there is no guilt in any of us here sitting in this room, or anybody listening, having made choices or done certain things that they only knew how to in order to survive. We have been taught these things from very early on, and they may not be healthy, but we didn't know. And
Mhm.
y'all are doing the work. The
Yeah.
work that is done means that there is opportunity for something much bigger, much better, to be different, to be the better mom, to be the better spouse, right? To be better for yourself. First and
Mhm.
Mhm.
foremost, you
Yeah,
have to
first
be
and
better
foremost.
for yourself before you can be better for others. Put that damn oxygen mask on, right? Every time I hear that, I want to
Mhm.
punch kittens, but it's true. You have to take care of yourself. However, you have to be, and I'm not specifically pointing or singling you out, Melanie. I'm talking to
Yeah,
anyone
for
listening.
sure.
You have to be
Mhm.
willing to do that work. You can sit there and feel guilty all day long for who you were or what happened or who you may not have been. And it's okay to recognize that you were just doing the best you could, and to have grace for yourself. And you can change it, but you
Mhm.
have to be the one to do that work. You can't just do surface level work. You can't just
Yeah.
show up to therapy to check off boxes.
Mhm.
I mean, well, first you have to go to therapy,
Right.
and then it's not just going and checking off that box. And it's that self discovery. What is going on around me? What else do I need to do? How am I showing up? Right? How am I showing up? What am I hearing? How does it connect to past things? What can I do to grow? What is most important for me? And I think for all of us sitting here, because I feel very kindred spirity with all of you, because we've done a lot of the similar or a lot of the same types of things. I think we have this understanding and perspective that we can share with the world. It's not about letting the past define you. It's about learning and accepting where that past has been, regardless of what we're talking about, and allowing it to help move us forward into being better for ourselves and for our loved ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just because you have another child or you get remarried doesn't mean like, oh,
Right.
magic, like
Yep.
life is back to normal and
Right.
everything is great. Like it comes with its own next level of hardships and different
Mm-hmm.
hardships. And, it's the work never stops.
It never
No, I
stops.
will say, Brooke, to your point, there is power in being leveled, right? So I was thinking about what you were saying in the beginning about this ego that's a protection, or these expectations that we have for ourselves to kind of rise up and meet our potential. When your world is opened up and you fall into a black abyss, like when you are leveled, all of that goes away. What ego are you chasing at that point?
Right.
You have been grounded to a point where you're basically just trying to breathe in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And there's power in that, because then what do you have to lose? So there, you have no expectations of yourself. All that stuff that you were chasing and thought, Mel, you were talking about being very career driven, and all the stuff that we were taught to chase all along the way, none of that matters anymore. So you get this fresh start. And I have found through the work that I've been doing through new beginnings and healing is that that has translated into other relationships. Like with my parents, for example, I will look at my sons and say, please forgive me. I've never been the mom of a 12-year-old before. I can do that better. I can say that differently. So do you forgive me? Can we try that again? And I am very open. And what I realize is I now have this set of tools to parent in a way that is important to me, but I might not have chased that. Um, Method, or I might not have chased that way of knowing how to do things differently had I not gone through that. And something that hit me a few years ago is my relationship with my own mom. She didn't survive grief the same way that I did, and there were some things that, man, she'd never been a parent of me before. And so it's really beautiful how I can be an example to either friends or my family in ways where we are now experiencing really beautiful relationships because I've given myself grace, but I've given them grace. Um, yeah, it's just so it's new beginnings in so many different areas, not just the genre of what impacted our tragedy, I guess.
And I mean, it is a great point that you're making, because I think when I was talking earlier about how I was kind of like just floating through my life for the first 35 years, it wasn't until Logan's death stripped me raw. Like
Hmm.
it had me, my handle for Instagram back then was picking up the shattered pieces. I mean,
Yeah.
because that's what I felt like I was doing. My life had been reduced to the utmost foundation. There was
Hmm.
nothing left of me and who I was in that moment,
Hmm.
and for people who might have not experienced it or are just now experiencing it, that can seem really fucking scary. And it is. I mean, it
Hmm.
is just, it can be really, really dark and really hard. And you don't know how to breathe from one moment to the next, but you do it anyway. And as you walk along, you're right. I mean, if you allow it, it clears that foundation for you in
Hmm.
order to maybe change what was not working before, or do things differently, so that, I hate to say they're learning lessons, right? They are, though. I mean,
Hmm.
hindsight is 2020. You can take a look back
Hmm.
and be like, well, shit, I didn't hear, or this is how I was here, or, and I don't want to be that way again. And
Mhm.
it does, it can expand to your entire family. It expands to all sorts of areas, in your life if you should allow it,
Mhm.
for sure. Well, ladies, we could talk forever, huh?
Mhm.
We could.
We
Is
really could.
there,
And
yep.
Brooke, I'm so sorry, but I know
No,
we're
no,
at time,
please
but
do.
I feel like it's really important for me to say this piece. And I'm not just kind of, as the kids would say, I'm not going to glaze Melanie just because she's my person, because I always just give truth bombs. But hearing her talk about, her regrets and her pain points when it comes to, focusing on building her marriage with David, and she wasn't really focusing on filling her life with busyness to avoid the pain that she was feeling from the grief and the loss of Leon, and feeling like she wasn't present for the boys. We've had a lot of conversations about that, but I think it's really important for me to say this because we've talked about my marriage, and I shared last year was a tough year. Paul and I didn't do the foundational work to grow as a couple, right? Like, he joined this unit of me as a mom, and me being a mom has always been my number one priority, to the detriment of my marriage. So I want to give the accolades to Mel because she did build and put the effort and the time into building this marriage with David. Because as we know, our children grow. I'm now experiencing being a mom of two young adults, and I've had to redefine who I am as a person, my identity, because my boys have grown, they leave. And that marriage is such an important foundation. And you're left with just your husband when the kids leave. And so I have a lot of regret because I didn't focus and prioritize my marriage with Paul the way that I should have. I mean, he and I have been together almost 10 years. We've never taken a trip, just the two of us. Like, that is really
Wow.
sad, and I feel bad for him. Well, that's a lie. We did one trip and I got the flu, and it was like, couldn't leave the hotel room, so that doesn't count. But I think that I have regret, right, where I didn't nurture my marriage the way that I needed to because I was so hyper fixated on being a good mom and doing it right and not letting my boys feel what I ever felt. But then Lincoln graduated. Lincoln went away to college, and Griffin is 21 living his life. And I'm like, hey, Paul, what's going on? Right? Like, we had to deal with it. So I'm not just trying to like praise Mel to make her feel better in this situation, but we all do the best that we can with
Yep.
what we have, like you said. Um, but I think being able to prioritize our marriages through whatever the trauma is a whole nother topic. But it was important for me to put that out there.
Yep. I mean, and that's honestly, and in full transparency, Jordan and I, since the end of last year, have been working on exactly that in order to, come together the way that we, especially because I think about that when the girls are gone, right? It's just going to be the two of us. And we've gone through some difficulties in the past few months because we've become aware of the lack of addressing the trauma that came before we were together and what we brought into our marriage. And it's been very, very difficult. It has been very difficult. And it's been exactly what we've needed in order to figure out who we are as individuals, how to clear out the trauma from before, and how we bring that trauma into our relationship together. So you're absolutely right. It is another episode, and it always seems to get juicy, right towards the end, and we're like,
Mhm.
time's up and we got to go. But
We'll hook them. We just hook them in.
that's right. Well, and I mean, I think that could be a very good panel because, just as you guys have been saying, Jordan and I have just been, we've always done the work, right? We've always been doing work. We started couples counseling, back when Logan was just a little and Mallory was just a baby. And we've always done individual and couples counseling and things. And those, I believe, like, they've never been the solution. I don't think there ever is a true quote unquote solution. And it's been a seed that has led us to the next stage. And, for us, our current stage, and to kind of speak at what you're talking to, Michelle, has led us into the finally recognizing the outside circumstances, the childhood circumstances, the trauma, young adult, inner child circumstances that have caused the issues. It's not about love between us. It's about those fucking things that happened before that we are just now starting to understand is what's driving the relationship versus the authenticity of the love between us. So thank you for bringing that up. And yes, that should definitely be another panel.
I feel
And
like it's a whole nother panel.
I know.
Marriage,
See,
marriage is tough anyway, but then
I
when
know.
you throw in trauma,
Yep.
it's marriage and trauma that's a whole new topic.
Yep, it is. And what I'm actually interested in, for those of you who are listening, I would love for you to submit questions to Trauma Uncensored. Email hello@traumauncensored.com, and feel free to ask or put out any sort of questions that you would like answered to. I would love to have a panel here with these four ladies. And maybe even some of the other people that I've spoken to in the past on different topics, with audience asking questions and us giving some of those experiences. I wouldn't call them answers, because answer would, to me, feels like it's a definite, and it
A right or wrong.
defines exactly. And I don't believe that. I believe everybody's experience is unique and different, and we all have things to add. But if you're listening and would love to hear some intake on or input on, from panels, I would love for you to submit a question. Again, that's at hello@traumauncensored.com. Ladies, as usual, I've loved sitting here with you. Thank you for your time and your vulnerability and your transparency and your tears. I appreciate the tears, because this isn't easy stuff, right? It's just not. So next time we'll find a topic. Maybe it'll be the marriage, the marriage component, because it is a very important topic to talk about. But I know we have no shortage of topics that we can discuss that people would be able to relate to. So thank you all once again for the three of you for being on today and talking with us, and for everybody who's listening. And until next time, this has been another episode of Trauma Uncensored. See you then. Bye.
Oh, hi.